Hello students, today I'm going to be talking about the first online lab for MAT120. We're going to be looking at an introduction to Google Sheets. I want to show you how it works, I want to show you what the things you can actually do in it are, and I wanted to show you a couple of things that we're going to be using for the rest of the class. We're going to start with a hypothetical situation. Let's say your teacher asks you the following 4 questions. Questions are, what is the approximate population of the U.S.? What's the average population size for a state? How many states begin with the letters A, B, C, and D? And how many states have a population of more than 5 million people? In order to answer this question, you could go to a bunch of different websites and try to find the answers, or you could try to calculate each and every individual answer by hand, or you could use a spreadsheet to help you. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to find a reputable source for my data. And I know that Wikipedia's job is to be a repository for online learning, online knowledge, and it's peer-reviewed, so it's usually pretty safe to use. So I go to Wikipedia and look for an article that says U.S. states by population, and lo and behold, it has it. It has a list of all of the different states, all of their populations estimated in 2019, all of their populations as of 2010, and a whole bunch of other information that may or may not be useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this data, and I'm going to put it into a spreadsheet software. The software that we're going to be using this year is Google Sheets. So in order to take this data and put it into a spreadsheet, because I can't really manipulate it here, it's just words or numbers on a page, I'm going to click out here and hold down my mouse, and we're going to drag down until I highlight everything that's in the table. So now I have everything in the table. I actually am going to eliminate a couple of things here. I'm not going to highlight all of the gray text at the bottom because I'm only looking for state data. I'm not looking for totals like all the contiguous U.S., all the 50 states. I'm not looking for that necessarily. I just want the data for the individual places inside the United States. Now I'm going to copy that data. The easiest way you can do that is on a Mac, Command-C, on a PC, Control-C, or by right-clicking and going copy. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that into a spreadsheet. Google Sheets is the spreadsheet that we're going to be using for this class, like I said. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to my Google Drive and open up a brand new spreadsheet. So I'll go into my Google Drive. And in my Google Drive, I've created a folder that says MAT120 Elementary Statistics Notes. If you're taking electronic notes, it'd be a good idea for you to organize it all in one file. Now I'm going to make a new document, a new Sheets, I should say. And this is a spreadsheet that's similar to Microsoft Excel, similar to all sorts of other spreadsheet software, but it's easy to use, it's free for anybody who's using Google, and it's actually pretty powerful. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the data that I copied from that other website and paste it into this document. So now I'm going to take that data and paste it into this document like I said. I'm going to put my cursor on cell A1, which is named for column A, cell 1, and press either Control-V or Command-V to paste. And it might take a couple of seconds here, but it comes up with all the data that it copied from the Wikipedia site that we used. Notice that the titles look a little bit different than that Wikipedia site because it looks like a little bit of it has been cut off. Now I'm going to show you a little about how to change around what it looks like here and try to make it look a little bit closer to the original document. I noticed that this is supposed to say Rank in States and Territories 2019, but the words are a little bit cut off. So I'm going to highlight everything that's in this top row by clicking on the 1. That selects every cell in that top row. And I'm going to go to Word Wrap. That's this button over here. Text wrapping tells me either I want the text to continue going and get cut off by the other columns, or I want it to wrap around. So in other words, it takes up more than one line. So I go to text wrapping and I choose wrap, which means it'll start going down rather than getting cut off by the other columns, which makes it a lot easier to read, a lot easier to see. Now this sheet has all of my data for states. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this sheet by double clicking on the name sheet 1. I want to indicate to anyone who uses this document that this first tab is going to have all of the state's data. So I'm going to write state data here, because it has all of the data for all the states. It has all the population estimates, the census population, etc., and even the names of these states. Now recall, one of the questions that we were supposed to answer was, what is the approximate population of the United States? So what I would like to do is take all of the states from this list and add all of their numbers together. For now, for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to take out all of the items in here that are not one of the 50 states. We're only looking for the population of the 50 states at this time. Looks like we have Puerto Rico here, which, while it is part of the United States, it isn't one of the 50 states, and that was the question that we're supposed to answer. So let's delete that row by right-clicking on it and choosing Delete Row. We also have some different districts down here. We have the District of Columbia, we have Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, etc. All of these are either districts or protectorates of the United States, but they're not one of the 50, so I'm only concerned about those 50 at this time. So I'm going to press Delete Row by selecting all of those and right-clicking. I'm going to do the same thing here. I select District of Columbia, I right-click, and I go Delete Row. Now it says I have 51 rows, which should make sense because I have 50 states and one row with all the information at the top. This row is called the header row. And keep that in mind because we're going to be referring to the header row a little bit later. One thing that I want you to recognize or realize is that when you're copying and pasting from documents online or copying and pasting from other sources, you may sometimes get corrupted data or data that doesn't make sense, something that Google Sheets can't figure out. For example, I'm looking at this absolute change column, and I see a lot of these errors. Now, this data doesn't look like it would be very useful in this instance because most of it is errors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this table a little bit. I'm going to clean the data by taking out this column. It's not going to be very useful to us because of all these errors. So again, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to choose to delete that column. All right. Now, referring to the first question, which was what's the approximate population of those 50 United States, what I'm going to do is only look at a couple of different columns. I don't really need the rank in states and territories in 2019 or 2010. I don't really need all this other stuff for that question. All I really need is the state and the population estimate as of 2019. That's about as good as we'll get until the census in 2020. So I'm going to take all of this data and I click and drag down until I get to the end of the list. So now that I'm at the end of the list, I'm going to do Control-C or Command-C if you're on a Mac. Again, I'm going to copy that data. And now I want to look at only this data separately. So what I'm going to do is go to the bottom left and click Add Sheet. That means I'm going to be able to make a sheet that is only the data I want to look at. I'm going to rename this data as the state populations, because that's the only thing that's going to be in this sheet. Again, I'm going to go up to cell A1, named for column A, row 1, and Control-V or Command-V to paste that information in there. Amazing. Now, one thing I notice as I scroll down this list a little bit is that some of the names are a little bit cut off. So a shortcut to make sure that the column is wide enough to accommodate all of the data is going to highlight the entire column, going to the edge of that column and seeing the side-by-side arrow and double-clicking. It makes it a little bit wider. It fits it to the data so that New Hampshire is no longer cut off, South Carolina is no longer cut off, Massachusetts is fully there, and so on. Now, in order to answer the question, what is the approximate population of the United States, I could go through and add all these with my calculator, but there's an easier way. At the bottom of this column, I'm going to write down the total. And here, I'm going to start using what's called formulas. Formulas are the real reason why people like using spreadsheets, because formulas automate some of the things you would be doing in mathematics. For example, instead of taking all of these numbers and adding them up by hand, I'm going to use a formula that's called sum. In order to tell Google Sheets that you're using a formula, the character that you start out with is the equal sign. So I'm going to type equals. Once I type equals, a small window will pop up that suggests something, and you can tell that Google Sheets already knows that I kind of want to make a sum here. But let's pretend that Google Sheets isn't making that suggestion, because you may be doing other things other than just trying to add everything together. So I put in the equals, which indicates to Google Sheets that I am going to be using a function. And then I'm going to write in sum. Now, Google Sheets can do a lot of stuff. It can do sum, it can do average, it can do difference, it can do product, it can do a lot of different things. But right now, I'm just looking for sum. In order to tell Google Sheets what exactly to add together, I need to figure out where my data is. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit, and I can see that the first cell that's got any data in it is this cell right here. It's the population of California. This cell is named B2 because it's in column B, row 2. So I'm going to start at B2, and I'm going from B2 all the way down until B51. I'm not going to include B52 in there because B52 is the cell that we're putting the formula in. So I'm basically telling the formula, I want you to sum everything between these two cells from B2, and then I'm going to put a colon, which means go up until B51. I'm going to close the parentheses now and press enter. That answer, that response, 327 million, that is the population of all 50 US states. Amazing. And total shows up in the bar as just total. But if I hover over this, or if I click on this 327 million figure, I can see that the formula that I used to get it is the sum between B2 and B51. One interesting thing that you should have seen so far is that sometimes when you scroll down in a spreadsheet, you'll see the current data, but you won't see that header row. Remember the header row we talked about? The header row is the thing that tells you what's in each column. So what I'm going to do is show you how to freeze that header row so that if you scroll up or down, it stays there. So even if you're looking at the bottom of the list, you still know what you're looking at. That option is in the View menu, so I'm going to click View, and you can see Freeze here. Freeze means I want it to stay on the screen regardless of where I scroll. And I'm going to only freeze one row because the information from the header is only in one row. When I click one row, you can see that there's a small gray barrier that occurs here. So if I scroll down, I'm looking at row 25, which is Alabama, but I'm still seeing that header row right above it. So no matter which way I scroll, I can keep in mind what is in those columns. I'm going to do the same thing to state data, the original document that we had. Notice that we're scrolled near the bottom of the sheet and we don't see the top here. But if I go to View, Freeze, one row, it'll do the same thing. It'll show that frozen row regardless of how far down I scroll. The next question asks us what is the average population size for a state. So I'm going to go back to that state population sheet. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. I've already found my total. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another row for average. And as you can imagine, what you're going to be doing is using another formula for this. I wouldn't want you to add all 50 of these numbers and then divide it by divide it by 50. Instead, what you're going to do is use another formula. Again, if you're using a formula, you must use the equal sign to tell, not Excel, but Google Sheets, that there's a formula incoming. You can see that it sort of knows what I'm talking about again. It wants me to use this average formula. You have to remember these formulas. It's not always going to be exactly relevant which formula you're going to use, but in this case, I'm going to use average. So I type in average, right? And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did with sum. I'm going to tell it all of the cells that have my data. So in this case, I'm going from cell B2, column B, row 2, all the way down to B51. So the average of B2 all the way down to B51. That tells us that 6,551,000 is the average population size for a state. And I was able to figure that out not by adding all the numbers together and dividing by the number of numbers, but by just using a function. The next question asks us for how many states begin with the letters A, B, C, and D. An easy way to figure that out is to take that state data. I'm going to grab this whole column. I can't just click this cell because it would just get that one cell. I'm going to go to where it says C. If I click here, it highlights the entire column. I'm going to press Control C or Command C on a Mac, and I'm going to make a new sheet. That new sheet is going to be state letter names. And in that new sheet, I'm going to make sure I'm highlighted on A1 and Control V or Command V, respectively. For all of these states, I'm going to make another column that says starting letter. And I'm going to go down the row and insert all of the starting letters. For example, California starts with a C. Texas starts with a T. Florida starts with an F, and so on. I'll pause the video and do this by myself so you don't have to watch me do it. All right, you can see I wrote down all of these letters here. It took me quite a long time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort this list by alphabetical order. I'm going to highlight the whole sheet by clicking in this blank cell here. And I'm going to ask the sheet to sort the data. So I'm going to go Data, and then I'm going to go Sort Range. I can sort it by anything I want, provided that I know what I'm sorting by. Does the data have a header row? Yeah, it's got the row that says state and starting letter. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to ask it to sort not by state, but by starting letter from A to Z. Sort. Once I've done that, I can have all of the different starting letters from A to D counted very easily. And you can see that once I click and hold all of these, I can look at the bottom right here and see that the count is 8. That's the video on the first lab for statistics. Good luck studying.